I spent nearly 5 years working on the Costa Miridor, a medium-sized cruise ship that regularly sailed between Malaga in Spain and Tangier in Morocco. Most trips felt the same: beautiful sunsets over the Alban Sea, late-night guitar music on the pool deck, tourists in flip-flops laughing over duty-free wine. Even storms didn't last long, and that routine made me feel comfortable, maybe too comfortable. I let my guard down the night a guest went missing. That evening, the weather forecast warned of rough seas, but the captain said we could still reach port on time. Before dinner, around 7 p.m., the sky turned dark gray. The wind picked up so quickly that the glass doors started shaking, and rain hit the windows like someone throwing gravel. Waves crashed into the ship, making the floor vibrate. My job was to patrol Deck 7, where guests like to smoke or take pictures. Company rules said that deck must stay shut during strong storms, so I stayed near the sliding doors to keep watch. After the first hour, the storm became worse. Lightning flashed constantly, lighting up the sea in eerie blue. The wind carried strange noises through the ship's metal halls: plates sliding in the kitchen, chairs falling in the lounge, faint shouting as crew members tried to secure things. Then I heard a new sound: screaming. At first it seemed like just one person yelling in fear, but then it sounded like multiple voices, all overlapping. The echo bounced off the walls, making it impossible to know where it started. My radio only picked up background noise, and no injuries were reported, so I stayed where I was and kept watching through the glass. The wind died down a bit after midnight, and I thought the worst was over. The sea looked a little calmer, though the rain still blew sideways. A family from Valencia came and asked if they could step out to smoke. I told them to wait while I checked the deck. The outside lights were still off to save power, but dim emergency lights glowed along the railings. I opened the heavy door just a little. Cold air rushed in, smelling of salt and fuel. I leaned out and used my flashlight to scan the wet floor. Near the front rail, something red shined on the wood. The stain continued in smudges toward a metal grate where water drained over the edge. Rain and seawater made the color run, but it was too dark to be paint or rust. I shut and locked the door and called security on the radio. My voice was shaking more than the ship. Possible blood on deck 7, front right side. Two officers came quickly and confirmed what I saw. They followed the streaks to the front, where they stopped at the grate that let water pour off the ship's bow. Below, the sea churned in the darkness, hiding whatever had gone through. We blocked off the area and sealed the doors. Company rules said we had to count all passengers. The chief purser announced an emergency check over the speaker, but avoided any words that might scare people. Cabin stewards woke sleeping guests, checked public areas, and searched the small onboard cinema. Almost everyone responded, except one, a solo passenger named Elise Morgan, cabin 4123. She was a 42-year-old language teacher from Leeds, on her first cruise after a breakup. Her key card showed she had left her room for dinner, but returned before the storm began. 3 of us went to cabin 4123. We knocked, said who we were, and waited. No answer. A guard used a master key to unlock the door. I expected to see a tidy room, maybe a glass of wine on the table, but the guard stopped cold in the doorway, jaw tight. I looked inside. A dark spray covered the wall near the bed. The bathroom tiles were streaked with red, like someone rinsed paint but didn't clean it all off. The sheets were in a pile on the floor. No suitcase, no shoes, no Elise Morgan. None of us said anything as we backed out into the hall. The ship groaned beneath us, like an old house in the wind. Security pulled footage from outside her room. At 11:38, a man wearing black rain gear stood at her door. His hood was up, and a black mask covered his face. He knocked once, looked behind him, then knocked again. When she opened the door, he forced his way in. For 20 minutes, nothing else happened in the hallway. At 11:59, the same man came out, dragging a large duffel bag. He kept one hand on the door as if pulling it shut, then walked toward the stairs, the bag scraping against the carpet. Another camera saw him 2 decks up, heading toward the exterior exit near where I later saw the red trail. We never saw his face. A camera that could have caught it had stopped working earlier in the storm. Later, a wet raincoat and mask were found stuffed behind a toilet in a public restroom. The coat pockets were empty, except for a soaked piece of paper, possibly a boarding pass. We searched every crew cabin, every maintenance area, even the lifeboats. No one matched the man on the footage. The next morning, as the sky cleared and Tangier came into view, the captain ordered one last search. It found nothing. Moroccan police boarded first, then Spanish investigators. They questioned us for hours. I told them everything. The screams, the stain, locking the door because that's what the rules said. They asked if the blood might have come from inside the ship, but the floor sloped toward the drain. That meant something heavy had been dragged to the front, then slipped through the metal bars into the sea. The ship stayed docked for 3 extra days while investigators copied files and measured spaces. Passengers rebooked flights or stayed in hotels. Some still wore casino wristbands like they hoped their vacation would continue. Rumors spread quickly. Pirates, a jealous lover, organ smugglers. None of it fit the facts. When we returned to Spain with new passengers, Elise Morgan's cabin stayed locked. Housekeeping said a priest would bless it before the next journey. I avoided that hallway anyway. People stopped talking about what happened after a week, focusing instead on raises or time off. But I couldn't stop thinking about that night. The sounds kept replaying in my head, the screams mixing with the storm, getting louder each time the ship rocked, like the wind itself was ripping them from the air. I turned in my resignation 2 months later. The company didn't fight it. They understood why one more trip was too much. Now I live inland near Granada, far from any harbor. Some nights thunder rolls through the hills and the walls around me feel as thin as a ship's cabin. I lie there listening, almost expecting to hear rain hit steel and a voice crying out through the storm. But there's only silence and the ticking of my kitchen clock. I still see that masked man in my mind, walking calmly across the wet deck, dragging a bag behind him, leaving a trail of red. His face hidden, his steps certain, like he knew exactly when the cameras would miss him. Maybe he vanished into the crowd in Tangier, or maybe he stayed aboard in a new uniform. If he ever books another ticket under a new name, no one will notice until the sky darkens, the lights flicker, and he knocks on another door. I used to believe the sea could hide anything. That never scared me, until I watched it swallow a woman while the rest of us stood behind locked glass. Whenever I think of Elise Morgan, I picture her final moment, staring out at that violent sea crashing against the ship. That image haunts me long after the waves in my memory fade to silence. It happened in 2008, but I still think about that night almost every week. I remember what I was wearing, what I was drinking, even the song playing on the radio before the call came. My name is Annette, and this is my son Brandon's story, or at least the part I lived. I can't tell you how it ends, because we never got one. Brandon was 19, smart, strong-willed, with a plan for his future. He was studying wind energy at a college in Canby, Minnesota, about half an hour from our home in Marshall. That May night, he'd been out with friends, celebrating the semester's end. A few drinks, nothing wild. He told us he was fine to drive, and his friends confirmed it. I went to bed early. My husband Brian stayed up, flipping channels in the living room. Around 1:54 a.m., my phone rang. Brandon's name lit up the screen. "Mom, I drove into a ditch," he said. "I'm okay, just stuck." He sounded calm, not drunk or scared, just frustrated. He asked us to come get him, said he thought he was near Lynn, which was about 10 minutes away. We got in the car and drove, watching the roadside for his headlights. He said he'd flash them when he saw us, but we saw nothing. We called again. I can see lights in the distance, he said. I think it's a town. We kept driving. Still nothing. I'm going to walk toward the lights, he said. I told him to wait, but Brandon wasn't the type to sit still when he thought he could fix something. He started walking, and we stayed on the phone for nearly 47 minutes. That call, I still hear it clearly. We talked like normal. He described fences he passed, the sound of gravel under his shoes, how dark it was. He didn't sound afraid, but at one point he paused. "What is that?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I replied. Silence. Then a sharp noise. Maybe a grunt, maybe a scream. Then the line went dead. Brian and I kept calling. No answer. No voicemail. We drove around for another hour, hoping to see him or his car. At sunrise, we called the police. At first, they didn't act like it was urgent. He was 19. Maybe he ran away. Maybe he was hiding out. But I knew my son. When they finally traced his phone, they realized he wasn't near Lynn. He'd been over 25 miles away, near a tiny place called Taunton. He must have gotten lost after leaving Canby. They found his car in a ditch, just like he said. Doors shut, no damage, but no keys and no Brandon. Search teams came. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers, hundreds helped. The dogs picked up his scent, followed it across a field, into a dry creek, then up the other side. And then it vanished. No more footprints, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no clothes, nothing. Some guessed he fell into the creek and drowned, but it was dry. Others said maybe animals, but there were no remains. Some thought he left on purpose, but I knew better. He had money in his account, had just texted friends about finals. He had no reason to vanish. Years passed and nothing changed. Every spring, when the snow melts, I hope something might appear. A shoe, a piece of fabric, anything. But we never found one clue. I replay that call constantly. That sound he made, the confusion, the sudden silence. He saw something. I know it, and whatever it was made him disappear. Sometimes I sit on the side of the road and stare, wondering how far he walked, if someone saw him and didn't know it, or if I drove right past him. I've played that night in my head 1,000 times. Did he fall? Was someone watching? Did someone fool him? No one knows. His case is still open. Not cold, they say, just waiting. That means a file sits on a desk, aging. I still keep my phone by my bed, just in case it rings. Sometimes I think I hear it, even when it doesn't. People ask if I found peace. I say no, because peace comes from answers, and we don't have any. All we know is that Brandon walked into the night and never came back. I was the last one to hear his voice. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell. Click the icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. I still work the night shift at the outer economy parking lot at Kansas City International Airport. Most people think the job is simple, just driving a small truck past rows of parked cars, scanning license plates, and writing tickets. But the winter of 2017 showed me how much can go unnoticed, even when it's right in front of you. I was 29 back then and felt proud of how smoothly I handled my shifts. The handheld scanner I carried beeped every few seconds as it read each plate. The system claimed every car was scanned once a day, and I believed that until the day a gray Dodge Ram in row H made the scanner freeze. I thought the battery was low, wrote the plate number on my clipboard, and moved on. It was January 17th, and the parking lot was half empty. The air was so cold it stung your skin. A week later, I passed the same truck again. The windshield had no snow or frost, so I figured the owner wasn't on a trip, but maybe worked inside the airport and parked here to save money. I knocked on the hood. Usually metal gets freezing cold sitting out in winter, but this hood felt faintly warm, like it had only recently cooled down. I didn't think much of it and kept driving. When March came, it brought damp air and early morning fog. The roads stayed mostly quiet, though spring break brought more travelers and the shuttle buses were loaded with luggage. But that same gray Dodge never moved. Its windows were now covered in dust, and the yellow ticket I had placed under the wiper was still there. According to company rules, any car left for more than 30 days was supposed to go on the tow list. But somehow the logs showed that the plate was still getting scanned. I checked again and saw my badge number next to several entries, even though I knew I hadn't scanned it. I figured the software had glitched and told myself I'd report it, but I never did. When May came and the heat returned, I often cracked my truck windows open to stay alert. One humid night, I caught a faint, strange smell in row H, kind of sweet and rotten. I assumed it was a dead animal or maybe an old cooler someone left behind. I looked around with my flashlight but saw nothing. The smell disappeared after a minute, and I filed my report like usual without saying anything. In July, the sun beat down hard. The pavement shimmered with heat, and abandoned bags piled up next to cars whose owners had missed flights. The bad smell in row H had gotten worse, so much that even shuttle drivers joked about someone forgetting their lunch. Every time I caught that smell, I thought of the gray Dodge. Tickets kept piling up on its windshield, now dry and curling like old leaves. One day I scanned the plate again. Nothing. But the screen still showed a green check mark from the night before, marked with my badge number. That didn't make sense. When I asked the dispatcher, she said the system might have been showing an old scan that got stored. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Then on September 12th, I woke up to rain and a news story about a missing man on the radio. His name was Randy Potter, 53 years old, from Lenexa. He had disappeared back in January. His family was asking anyone near the airport to look out for a silver Dodge pickup. I froze in the middle of pouring coffee. The reporter repeated, "Silver Dodge Ram, Kansas plates," and read the number. I didn't need to write it down. I knew it by heart after seeing it night after night for 8 months. I called my supervisor before work and asked him to meet me at row H. We drove in silence, windshield wipers tapping. The Dodge was still there, parked between two faded yellow lines. The windshield was almost too dirty to see through. Tickets stuck under the wiper looked like a dead bouquet. I stepped out and smelled it right away. No more guessing. Even the rain couldn't hide that awful, thick smell. My supervisor's face turned pale. He grabbed his radio with shaky hands and called airport police. I stood by the truck while officers came and forced open the door. When the latch popped, the sound echoed in the empty lot. A rush of hot, damp air hit me in the face. The smell was so strong, it made my eyes sting. I had to back away and cover my mouth. Inside, they found what was left of Randy Potter, slumped behind the steering wheel. The coroner said he likely died within a day after leaving home back in January. For 8 months, he had sat in that spot. We all passed him every night, trusting our scanners more than our instincts. That evening, news trucks crowded the lot. Headlines questioned how a man's body could go unnoticed in a place filled with cameras and security patrols. Some people blamed budget issues. Others blamed lazy workers. I blamed myself. I had touched that truck's hood. I had smelled something odd. I had seen strange scan logs. And each time I made excuses because it felt impossible to believe a man had been dead that close to my route. The Potter family held a press conference near the baggage claim. I stood in the back, wearing my orange vest with the company logo covered by rain. His sister thanked strangers who helped share missing person flyers online. She didn't thank the airport staff, and I didn't blame her. No apology would have been enough. A month later, management installed new plate readers and made us go through training on how to do manual checks again. A memo was sent out saying human eyes had to confirm every scan. I read it, signed at the bottom, and returned to row H. The spot where the Dodge had been looked normal again. Just a blank patch of pavement. I couldn't smell anything with my nose anymore. They had pressure washed the area. But I still felt something, like a memory that stung any time I saw a car sitting too long. Now it's 2025, and I still drive through those rows after midnight. I lean out the window and breathe, relying on my senses instead of a screen. Most nights everything is fine, but every once in a while, a scanner beeps slow at a car that looks too quiet. When that happens, I stop, get out, and check the inside. I tell myself it's part of the job, but really it's something else. I just never want another Randy Potter sitting in silence, waiting months before someone notices he's gone. I was just a kid in the Boy Scouts when this happened, maybe around 11 or 12 years old. It was one of my first summer camps with the troop. We were deep in the forest, surrounded by tall trees, dirt paths, and the sounds of birds and bugs. Every evening, we ate dinner together in a big wooden mess hall with long tables and benches. It was always loud in there, people laughing, talking, and the noise of forks and plates clinking together. But one night things were different. As we sat down to eat, a thunderstorm rolled in. At first it was just light rain and far-off thunder, but it quickly got worse, really bad. Loud thunder crashed above us, and lightning flashed outside the windows like a camera going off. It poured outside, and it didn't seem like the storm was going to stop anytime soon. After dinner, we expected to head back to our campsite, like we usually did, but the staff told us we couldn't leave. They said the storm was too strong and dangerous, and lightning was striking very close. So we had to stay inside the mess hall with nothing to do. We waited and waited. Almost 3 hours went by. Some of the kids played cards, others just sat and talked in small groups. I was getting bored and sleepy, still sitting on the hard wooden bench with my rolled-up poncho in my lap. Finally, someone made an announcement. The staff said they hadn't seen any lightning for over 30 minutes, so it should be safe to head out. My troop quickly stood up and got ready. Even though it was still raining hard and the sky was pitch black, none of us wanted to stay in the mess hall any longer. It was boring and everyone was tired of waiting. We pulled up our hoods, turned on our flashlights, and started walking into the dark rain. Not even 5 minutes after we started moving, a huge lightning bolt lit up the sky. It flashed across the trees and showed us how heavy the rain still was. For a moment, everything was as clear as day, and then it all went dark again. Some of us slowed down a bit, nervous, but nobody turned back. We didn't want to go back to the mess hall. The campsite wasn't too far, so we just kept walking. Our campsite was far from the others, tucked near the edge of the forest, surrounded by thick trees and a small open space. No other camps were nearby, and no one should have been walking around that part of the woods, especially not in the middle of a storm like this. Once we got to the site, we all gathered under a small pop-up tent. It didn't keep us completely dry, but it helped a little. We stood close together, flashlights turned off, just listening to the wind and the rain hitting the fabric above us. Then something weird happened. One of the scouts pointed toward the trees and said, "What's that?" We all looked. Deep in the woods, not very far from us, we saw a small light, like a headlamp, slowly moving between the trees. It was faint but clearly there. The beam shook like someone walking with it. That didn't make any sense. Nobody was supposed to be out there. All the other groups were far away, and everyone was either in their tents or still at the mess hall. Whoever or whatever it was, they were in a place they weren't supposed to be. Drew and Michael, our older scouts and youth leaders, tried to keep us calm. Drew shouted, "Hey, who's there?" Then Michael added, "Do you need help?" The light stopped moving. It stayed still for a few seconds. Then the white light turned off. We were left in complete darkness, frozen in place. A second later, a tiny red light came on. It wasn't a flashlight beam, just a red glow like a headlamp set to night mode. But now it was different. The red light didn't move slowly. It suddenly raced through the trees, moving fast, way faster than anyone could run in a storm like this. No sounds, no voice, just the red light speeding between the trees before vanishing into the dark. That's when we all started to panic. Everyone began whispering, gasping, and asking questions all at once. Some of the younger scouts were scared and freaking out. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't hear anything else. Drew and Michael told us to stay under the tent. "We'll go check it out," Drew said. "Don't move." They grabbed their flashlights and walked into the woods, heading toward where we saw the light. We waited under the tent for what felt like forever. Maybe 30 minutes passed. Finally, Drew and Michael came back. They were soaked, breathing heavy, and said everything was okay. They told us it was just another scout. They said the kid had gotten in trouble earlier and had to clean up a part of the camp that night. He probably didn't want to talk to anyone and was just trying to finish his punishment. But something about their story didn't make sense to me. Why would someone be out there cleaning in the middle of a storm like that? Why would they run away as soon as we saw them? And how could they move so fast through the wet woods in the dark without falling or making any noise? Even at that age, I felt like something was wrong. Years later, when I was around 16, I saw Drew again at a troop reunion. We were older by then, and I decided to ask him about that night. I really wanted to know what had actually happened. I said, "Hey, do you remember that night at camp with the red light in the woods? What really happened?" Drew looked at me for a few seconds and then gave a small laugh. "You remember that?" he said. "Yeah, that was weird." He got quiet, then told me the truth. He and Michael never saw anyone out there. They searched for a long time but didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of someone running through. Nothing. They made up the story about the punished scout just to keep us calm, but something had definitely been there. Something that shouldn't have been. It got close to our campsite, close enough that we saw it, and when it knew we noticed it, it ran off. Now I'm 17, and I still think about that night. I have no idea what we saw. It never made a sound. It didn't speak. It just watched us until we saw it. Then it disappeared into the storm. This happened when I was in my second year of high school. I didn't have a car yet, so I walked to most places. I spent many nice afternoons walking with friends to local stores or just hanging out. One afternoon, I was walking with my girlfriend and classmate Andy. We liked to walk to the nearby pharmacy to get candy or makeup. Just the usual stuff teens do. Across the parking lot from the pharmacy, there used to be a dry cleaners. That day, Andy and I were walking and chatting about random things. As we got closer to the dry cleaners, I suddenly got this strange, bad feeling, like something was wrong. It hit me out of nowhere, like a cold breath on the back of my neck. I looked over at Andy, but she seemed normal, still talking. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It was a large van parked behind the dry cleaners, all black with black tinted windows. A man was standing next to it. He was really tall, well over 6 feet, and he was dressed in all black, from his boots to his hat. I remember thinking he looked kind of like a cowboy. His hair was thick and silver gray, and his face looked rough and aged. But the thing that scared me was that he was staring straight at us. That awful feeling in my chest grew stronger. I quickly told Andy, "Come on, let's walk faster." She looked confused but started walking quicker with me. As we moved away, I heard a man's voice call out, saying something like, "Hey, hey girls." I didn't stop. I kept walking straight into the pharmacy. Andy asked me what was going on. I told her about the man, and she kind of laughed it off. She thought maybe he was just being weird or joking. I let it go and tried to focus on shopping, but not even a minute later, I saw the same man walk into the pharmacy. My heart jumped. I walked over to Andy, who had gone into the next aisle. I told her the man had followed us inside. I said maybe it was just a coincidence and he was there to shop too. But that creepy feeling came back. About a minute later, I noticed the man standing near the end of the aisle we were in. I didn't look at him directly. I just quietly walked into another aisle, then another. But every time the man followed, he kept standing at the end of whatever aisle we moved to. Andy still thought it was just a weird coincidence, so she walked to the next aisle. I used the big mirror on the wall, the one the store uses to watch for shoplifters, to keep an eye on him. At first, he didn't move. I let out a breath, thinking maybe we were indeed imagining things. As I walked to the feminine care aisle, I looked up and my heart nearly stopped. The man in black was right next to me. He didn't speak, didn't touch me, or even make eye contact, but he stood extremely close, staring at the shelves like he was shopping. I could see him out of the corner of my eye. His hands were behind his back, and there was a small smirk on his face. Without looking directly at him, I quickly turned and walked over to the magazine rack by the exit door. But to my horror, he followed me and again stood right beside me. I froze in place, unsure what to do. The store was busy with people walking in and out, and yet no one seemed to notice anything strange. But the man wouldn't leave my side. Now I knew for sure he was following us. Still, we were young and unsure what to do. Neither of us felt confident telling the store staff. The man hadn't done anything directly. No words, no actions. So we were afraid they'd laugh it off or not believe us. I found Andy and told her he was definitely following us and asked what we should do. She looked scared now too and agreed the workers probably wouldn't help. Just as we were talking about what to do next, we saw the man finally turn and leave the store. Andy let out a sigh of relief, but neither of us wanted to walk out into the parking lot alone. This was before we had cell phones, but there was a payphone across the lot near the corner of the street. I took a deep breath, looked around to see if the van was still there, and watched as it drove away and pulled onto the road. Even so, I decided to call my dad to pick us up. I was full of adrenaline and nervous, but I kept calm. I told Andy, who looked really shaken, that everything would be fine and that we'd walk to the payphone together. She kept watch while I dialed. I told my dad what happened and asked him to come get us. He didn't really seem to believe us and acted like maybe we were overreacting, but I didn't want to get into it too much on the phone. We were still standing in a public spot, and I just needed us to be safe. After the call, we went back to wait inside the glass kiosk at the pharmacy. We watched the parking lot, didn't see the van anymore, but I still had this awful feeling. A few minutes later, my dad's car pulled up. Andy and I quickly got into the back seat. Suddenly, that bad feeling hit me hard again. I turned to Andy and said sharply, "Get down now." She didn't hesitate. We both dropped to the floor in the back seat. My dad looked confused and asked, "What are you two doing?" I yelled, "Drive!" Just as he hit the gas, I peeked out the window just enough to see the black van come speeding back into the lot. It pulled up near the pharmacy entrance, but the driver didn't get out. That's when I realized two things. First, he didn't see us get into the car, and second, he had come back expecting to find us walking. He had returned to grab us. Andy and I stayed down, breathing hard, trying to calm down. She later said she was impressed by how I stayed calm through it all. We never went back to that pharmacy or that area for a long time. I wish we had been able to get the license plate number, but everything happened so fast. I'm just thankful we both made it out okay. It was a Wednesday night in late November when I got the notification on my phone. Large pepperoni, extra cheese, and a bottle of cold drink. The delivery was going to St. Joseph's Medical Center on the west side of town. I'd delivered there a few times before, usually to nurses pulling double shifts. The place always gave off a stuffy, weird feeling, but the tips were good, so I took the order. It had been raining all day. By the time I pulled up near the ambulance entrance, the sidewalk was slick and shiny like black glass. I turned off the engine, grabbed the warm food bag, and followed the delivery notes. Use the south entrance, take the elevator to the third floor, turn left, and follow signs to rehab. Front desk will pay. Inside, the lobby lights buzzed above me. A security guard looked up from his phone and waved me through. Past the elevators, the hallways were quiet, with only the squeaky sound of my sneakers and the humming lights above. I pressed the elevator button for the third floor and breathed in the usual hospital smell. bleach, and plastic. When the doors opened, I expected to find the rehab unit busy, but the hallway was dim and quiet. Only small nightlights glowed over the doors. A bulletin board still had paper turkeys from an old craft project. A hand-drawn arrow pointed to the right. Rehab check-in. I followed it. The front desk was under a ceiling fan that didn't move. A little sign read, "Back in 5 minutes." No one was there. Behind the desk, another hallway led to patient rooms. The doors were half open, lights off. I tapped the counter, checked my phone. 2:11 a.m. 5 minutes passed. Then 5 more. Still no one. I shifted the hot food bag from one hand to the other and leaned against the wall. That's when I heard a voice. "I just want to go home." It came from the room right beside me. The voice was quiet and tired but clear. I turned to look. A man was lying on a bed propped up on pillows. He looked like he was in his 50s. He wore a hospital gown, and there were clear tubes connected from his arms and nose to some quiet machines. A single lamp on the bedside table gave off a soft orange glow. He looked straight at me, not angry or desperate, just calmly staring into my eyes like he knew me. For a moment, I wondered if maybe he had ordered the food. Maybe he was just sick of hospital meals. But before I could say anything, someone came up behind me fast. A young guy in scrubs slid behind the desk, half apologizing. "Sorry, got stuck changing a wound vac." "That the pizza?" I handed him the food and tried to act normal. "Yeah, large pepperoni, $13.50. He typed in a code and counted the money. While he worked, I glanced back into the room. No lamp, no man. The bed was stripped bare, mattress leaning on its side like housekeeping hadn't finished. The machines were gone. Only a rolled cord was left on the floor where an IV stand might have been. The nurse gave me the cash and asked, "You good?" I guess I looked out of it. I nodded, pocketed the money, and headed to the elevator. But I couldn't stop myself. I acted like I was checking the signs, then slowly walked down the hallway again, peeking into the rooms. Every room was empty, beds pushed to the side, linens in carts, lights off. At the end of the hall, a notice was posted outside a supply closet. Rehab wing moved to 4th floor, effective October 15th for renovations. That was 6 weeks ago. The elevator ride down felt slow. My phone buzzed with another delivery, but my mind was stuck on the man's face. Back in my car, I turned up the heat but still felt cold. At a red light, I did something dumb. I called the number on the receipt. No answer. Voicemail said, "Clinical Services, St. Joseph's." Very generic. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake. Maybe I saw a reflection. Maybe I was just tired. But I don't think I imagined the smell of antiseptic or the sound of those plastic tubes tapping the bed frame. 2 weeks later, the hospital ordered again, late at night. I thought about skipping it, but I needed the money. This time, the instructions said, "Main entrance, 4th floor rehab." Nothing about the south entrance. When I stepped out of the elevator on the 4th floor, it was completely different. TVs were on, nurses moved around, patients were laughing at some sitcom. I dropped off the pizza and asked casually, "Hey, did rehab used to be on 3? The charge nurse, her silver hair tied tight, frowned. "For a while, yeah. Construction issues." "Why?" I shrugged. "Last time I thought I saw a patient down there." She paused and said, "There shouldn't be." We left that floor mid-October. Power shut off at night. Some long-term patients say they see things. People who left too soon. Try not to let dark corners bother you. I laughed a little and took the elevator down, but my hands were sweating. Since that night, I drive past St. Joseph's with the windows up and the radio off. I tell myself hospitals are full of strange reflections, broken lights, and tricks of the eye. Most nights I believe it, but on quiet nights when the rain taps the windshield just right, I hear that same voice. "I just want to go home." And every time, without thinking, I glance at the rearview mirror, just to make sure no one's sitting there, waiting for a ride I can't give. I love being a cop. The reason I became one is because a cop once saved me when I was a kid. I was 10 years old. It was a cold winter evening, and my mom had left me in the car for just a few minutes while she ran into a store. A man walked up and tried to break in. Out of nowhere, a cop who just happened to be driving by pulled over and scared him off. That moment stayed with me. From then on, I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't just want to wear a uniform. I wanted to protect people, to be the reason someone felt safe. Most days on the job are normal. You clock in, answer calls, help someone locked out of their car, break up an argument, and every time I finished something, even if it was small, I felt proud. I felt like I was doing something that mattered, like I was part of something bigger. I still feel that way. But there's one night that changed how I saw everything. One night that made me question the job. One night that made me love it just a little bit less. It was just after midnight, November 29th, 2015, in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. It was freezing cold. I remember that because I had just turned on the seat heater in my patrol car when the call came in, a noise complaint. Someone reported loud music coming from a car parked on a street. It sounded like a simple case. I was the only officer free at the time, so I went alone. When I arrived, the street was quiet, except for the thumping bass coming from a black Chevy parked along the curb. I parked behind it, got out, and walked to the driver's side window. I shined my flashlight inside. The man looked up at me, eyes red and glassy. He looked young, maybe mid-20s. He rolled down the window. I asked for ID. His name was Lance Carr. I went back to my car to run his information. I remember thinking, he doesn't seem dangerous. Just a guy who probably drank too much and was trying to sober up. Off a bad night. The results came back fast. Lance's car had a felony warrant out for his arrest. I took a deep breath, walked back to his window, and told him to step out of the car. He hesitated, so I calmly repeated myself, making it clear he was under arrest and needed to put his hands behind his back. That's when everything went wrong. Lance suddenly turned and threw a wild punch at my face. I ducked just in time, but he jumped on me and knocked me to the ground. The cold pavement knocked the air out of me. I quickly reached for my radio and called for backup. He was on top of me, and he wasn't just trying to run, he was trying to hurt me badly. He punched, elbowed, and started grabbing at my throat. I couldn't breathe. I heard a woman yelling nearby, begging him to stop. I don't know if she lived there or was walking by, but she shouted that she had already called for help. Her voice felt far away. She didn't try to help, just stood there yelling. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a kid. Completely helpless. I got one arm free and reached for my gun. I pulled it from the holster and fired. The shot missed. The flash lit up his face for a second, and bits of gravel flew up. But it didn't stop him. His grip on my throat got tighter. He said something I'll never forget. "I'm going to kill you." I don't know how long the fight lasted. It felt like forever, but later I found out it was just a few minutes. Still, those minutes were the longest of my life. My vision was going dark. I couldn't get a full breath. I remember thinking, this can't be how it ends. Not like this. Finally, I heard tires screeching and saw flashing lights. 2 squad cars pulled up. Officers jumped out, yelling commands. They pulled Lance off me and got him in cuffs. I was barely awake but tried to help. I remember reaching for his arm while they held him down, and then I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital. My neck was bruised, my ribs ached, and my head was pounding. They told me I had a concussion and a cracked rib. I stayed in the hospital for 2 nights, mostly just lying there, thinking about everything. The doctors said I was lucky. If help had come just a minute later, things could have gone much worse. I was off duty for 2 weeks. I spent that time at home, recovering, watching old movies, trying not to think. But of course, I did think. I thought about how fast it all happened, how close I came to dying, how being a cop isn't just about solving problems, it's also about surviving. Eventually, I returned to work. I didn't want that one night to define my whole career. I didn't want to give up on something I had worked so hard to be part of. But if I'm being honest, things didn't go back to normal. Lance Carr was found guilty of first-degree assault and sentenced to 10 years in prison. That sentence surprised me. 10 years is a long time, especially compared to what others get for similar charges. Part of me thought it was too much. Another part of me thought it wasn't enough. I don't know, but the court took it seriously, and maybe that's what matters most. I still think about the woman who just stood there watching. I try not to blame her, but it's hard. I don't know what I expected. She wasn't trained for that kind of moment. Most people aren't. Still, I can't help but feel like she could have done something. Anything. Today, I still wear the badge. I still patrol. But I don't rush into things the way I used to. I don't assume people will cooperate just because I ask. That night changed me. It taught me danger doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it just waits. Quiet. Like a parked car. Lance gets out next year. I've thought a lot about that. I don't feel angry at him anymore. I'm not scared either. I just hope he finds something better to do with his life. I hope he works, finds better friends, and moves on from that night, just like I've tried to do. But one thing I know for sure, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget what it felt like to fight for air, to fight for my life, wondering if help would get there in time. No matter how many years pass, that night will always stay with me. When I was 20 years old, life showed me that some fears are worse than anything you can imagine. I lived alone in a small 2-story house on a quiet street where people mostly kept to themselves. I liked the quiet. It made me feel safe. The house had a lot of windows, especially downstairs, and I always kept them locked at night, except for the kitchen window. It had a strong screen and was about 15 feet off the ground, so I thought it was safe. Or at least I thought so. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning on a chilly spring night. The streets were quiet and I could hear nothing but distant cars. I was upstairs in my bedroom, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a strange sound. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then I heard it again, soft rustling near the bushes below my window. My heart started racing. I carefully walked to the window, trying not to make noise, and peeked through the curtain. I froze. Someone was standing outside staring up at my window. I couldn't see their face clearly, but I saw the shape, the wide shoulders, the way they stood, and my stomach dropped. It was my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband. We had separated months ago after I filed a restraining order. He'd been violent and abusive. I was trying to rebuild my life without him, but now he had found me. Fear gripped me. My legs shook so badly I thought I might fall. I grabbed my phone and quietly called 911. I whispered everything to the operator while watching him from the shadows. He slowly moved around the house, checking windows and trying door handles. Every time he got closer, I could hardly breathe. The operator told me help was on the way. I kept describing what I saw, my voice shaking. Then he vanished from sight. I leaned forward, trying to hear where he went. That's when a new smell filled the air, strong and sharp. Gasoline. My heart raced. He was going to set the house on fire. I panicked. I ran downstairs, looking for a safe way out. But every door felt like a trap. Every window felt exposed. The kitchen oddly seemed safest because it was raised up. I climbed onto the counter and held my breath, praying he wasn't just outside. Seconds felt like forever. Suddenly, red and blue lights lit up the street. Their colors danced across my kitchen walls. I heard officers shouting commands and heavy footsteps all around the house. Relief hit me hard. From the window, I saw them surround him. He was caught red-handed, pouring gasoline along the walls. Police tackled him, handcuffed him as he fought and screamed, full of rage. But it was over. He was arrested and later charged with attempted arson. I watched them take him away, and I felt completely drained, but safe. In the days after, I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump, but I refused to live in fear. I started changing things. I joined a gym and turned all that fear into energy. I trained, hitting the heavy bag again and again, letting all the pain pour out with every strike. Slowly, I got stronger, not just my body, but my mind too. My trainer saw my progress and encouraged me. I went pro as a boxer, and every match made me feel powerful again. My journey later led me to a job at the state penitentiary as a correctional officer. It's strange how things worked out. I ended up working in a place like the one where my ex-husband was sent. At the prison, I got advanced self-defense training, taught by the same experts who train Secret Service. Each class gave me more confidence. With every lesson, I felt the fear inside me fade away. Now I'm not the same person. My past doesn't control me anymore. I'm strong. I'm sure of myself. I decide who I am now. I've learned that being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you face the fear and keep going. I'm not anyone's punching bag anymore. The next morning was gray and quiet, like even the sky knew what had happened. I didn't go to school. My mom told them it was a family emergency, and I was glad. I didn't want anyone to see my puffy eyes. We wrapped Orange's blanket, the one with faded little fish on it, around him and put him in a shoebox the vet gave us. Mom set the box on the kitchen table and looked up places that handled pet cremation. I sat on the floor next to the table, knees pulled up, listening to every small sound in the house. The fridge hummed, the heater clicked, the wooden sunroom creaked now and then like it was breathing. When Mom left to get papers from the vet, I stayed home alone. I should have felt empty, but something kept poking at my thoughts, like tapping fingers inside my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the two dreams I'd had, both so vivid, so close together. In both, Orange had turned into something huge, towering like more than a cat. The dreams didn't feel random. They felt like signs, maybe even warnings. But warnings about what? I walked into the sunroom. Morning light shone through the glass, but one window caught my eye. There was a strange smudge at shoulder height. I got closer. It looked like something with a wide, flat nose had pressed its face against the glass, leaving a foggy oval. Around the shape were streaks, like rough fur or hair had brushed the surface. My stomach dropped. I wiped it with my sleeve and stepped back, but the shape still faintly showed, like a handprint left on a mirror. I closed the blinds even though the day already felt gray. At lunchtime, Mom came back looking tired. We drove across town to a small pet memorial place that smelled like lilies and melted candle wax. A quiet worker gently took the shoebox and explained we'd get an urn in a few days. I nodded but barely heard a word. Outside, the wind carried a strange smell, earthy and sour, like a storm was waiting nearby. That night, Mom fell asleep early, with a book still open on her chest. I tried watching TV to take my mind off things, but every channel was too loud, too bright. Around 11 o'clock, I turned everything off and sat in the hallway. I leaned against the wall where we had found Orange. The floor was cold, but I stayed there. I wanted to feel the house, to sense if anything was wrong. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 12:47 a.m. when I heard it. A soft shuffle, not inside the house, but outside. It came from the back porch. At first it was faint. Then I heard another step, heavier, like something large had stepped onto the creaky wooden boards. I got up slowly and tiptoed into the kitchen, careful not to bump the wind chimes hanging by the pantry. I peeked through the small square window in the back door. The moon lit the yard just enough to see the tall grass shining with silver light. At the edge of the shadows near the big oak tree, something stood still. A tall, dark shape, too wide to be a person, too oddly shaped for a deer. It looked just like the half-moose, half-human creature from my dreams. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. It was standing in my yard, breathing. Even with the glass between us, I swore I could feel its warm breath. Its massive shoulders moved slowly as it breathed in and out. Then it turned its head, slowly, clearly, until its eyes locked on mine. I gasped without meaning to. The shape straightened, let out a low sound like a mix between a growl and a grunt, and took one heavy step toward the porch. Panic surged through me. I slammed the kitchen light switch. Bright light flooded the room and spilled into the yard. The creature vanished, either ducking into deeper shadows or fleeing into the trees. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. Mom called out, half awake, asking what was wrong. I said I saw someone in the yard. She threw on her robe and hurried in. We checked every window and door. All were locked. She wanted to call the police, but I pictured officers walking around with flashlights, finding nothing but muddy footprints. Footprints of what? I convinced her it was probably a raccoon or stray dog, and I was just jumpy because of Orange. She didn't fully believe me, but she agreed not to call. Neither of us slept after that. We made tea and sat at the kitchen table in silence. Around 3 a.m., Mom went back to bed. I stayed up. I opened my sketchbook and, with shaking hands, began to draw the creature. Wide shoulders, thick fur, long arms like a human, but hanging too low. When I finished, I stared at the drawing until the lines started to blur. I whispered, "What do you want?" Of course, no reply. But the house made a long creaking sound, almost like it sighed. The next day at school felt useless. I heard the teachers talking, but the words meant nothing. My friends waved. I barely waved back. By fifth period, I asked to see the counselor, pretending to feel sick. The counselor gave me tissues and said comforting things while I talked about losing Orange. I didn't say anything about the creature. How could I? How could I explain that something from my nightmare was now walking in my backyard? At 4 o'clock, I got home and found Mom outside, sharpening yard tools. She said we needed to stay busy or grief would take over. We spent the evening raking leaves and trimming bushes. We didn't talk about the night before, but each time the bushes moved or leaves rustled, we both looked up. As the sky grew dark, we rushed inside. Dinner was simple, canned soup. Then Mom said she wanted to sleep early again. I told her I had homework. The truth was, I planned to watch the backyard. At 11:30, I turned off the lights in the living room and sat quietly near the patio doors. The moon was thinner tonight, like a silver blade hiding behind drifting clouds. Wind shook the branches of the oak. Midnight passed. 12:30. 1:10. My eyelids started to droop. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a loud thump, then another. Something slammed into the patio door, rattling the glass. A shadow stood just a foot from me, huge and dark, blocking the moonlight. The creature raised a hand and hit the glass again with an open palm. I scrambled backward, knocking over a lamp. The bulb broke with a pop, tiny sparks fizzing. I crawled down the hallway yelling for Mom. She came running just as the creature hit the glass a third time. This time, the glass cracked, but it didn't break. Mom saw the figure and screamed. She didn't freeze. She grabbed her phone and called 911. As she talked to the dispatcher, I grabbed a broom and jammed it under the kitchen door handle in case it tried to come in. Minutes dragged by. Finally, I saw flashing lights. Red and blue colors lit up the yard. I peeked through the dining room curtain as two officers stepped into the yard with flashlights. Their beams swept across the lawn, up the trunk of the oak, along the fence line. Nothing. They knocked on the door, and Mom let them in. We told them what happened. They searched the yard again and found only deep impressions in the damp ground. Big ones. Much bigger than human footprints, than boot prints. More like hooves, but twisted by the weight of something walking upright. The officers took photos, told us to keep everything locked, and promised more patrols. After they left, the silence felt heavier than before. For 2 nights, police cruisers passed by, and nothing happened. But on the third night, the patrol didn't come. At 2:06 a.m., I woke up to a low scraping sound. My heart jumped. A strange smell drifted in, wet fur and old leaves. When I turned on my lamp, I noticed muddy streaks on my bedroom wall, just below the window. Something had brushed against the outside siding, maybe trying to find a way in. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my phone and called the police again. This time, a single officer named Rivera showed up. He walked around the house with his flashlight while I watched from inside. He found new tracks in the yard, deeper this time, leading off toward the woods behind our street. He told us it could be a bear, maybe one with mange, confused and hungry. That explanation made some sense in the daylight, but my sketch didn't look anything like a bear. Mom didn't wait. She ordered motion sensor lights and a camera online. The next afternoon, we set it all up. The camera faced the backyard and the lights would turn on if anything moved. That night, we sat in Mom's room watching the live feed on her tablet. Midnight passed. Nothing. Then just after 1 a.m., the lights outside flared to life. On the screen, a shape stepped into the camera's view. My breath caught. Its head nearly touched the top edge of the video frame. Shaggy fur covered its back, but its arms swung forward, long and human-like. It stopped and stared straight into the lens. I felt like it was staring directly at me. Then it did something I'll never forget. It raised one hand and slowly put a finger to where its lips would be, if it had lips. A clear shh motion. The lights timed out and the screen went dark. Mom gasped. She called out, telling me to turn on every light in the house. We spent the rest of the night in the living room with every light blazing. The next day, the footage was shared with the local police, but the image had glitches, lines and static, and they said it wasn't clear. They thought it might be someone in a costume playing a prank. They made a report and moved on, but I couldn't move on. I started researching stories, myths, anything about creatures that looked like moose mixed with people. I looked up wendigos, skinwalkers, shapeshifters, but none matched exactly. I started wondering if this thing had something to do with Orange. Maybe our cat had sensed it before we ever knew it was near. A week after we dropped Orange off, the memorial place called. We went to pick up the ashes. A kind worker handed us a small bronze urn with little paw prints on it. As I held it, I felt a strange calm settle over me. That night, I placed the urn on the windowsill in the sunroom, Orange's favorite nap spot in the afternoon sun. After that, the creature never came back. The nights became quiet again, though not quite normal. Every rustle outside still made me flinch. We kept the camera and the lights just in case. Every morning I checked the footage. Only raccoons or the occasional stray dog. Nothing bigger than the fence. I still have strange dreams, but they've changed. Now I see Orange in them, small and normal, sitting in the sunroom. Behind him, far out by the trees, a huge shadow watches but never steps into the yard. Orange looks at me and slowly blinks. The way happy cats do, as if telling me, it's okay now. I can't explain any of it. Maybe grief twisted into something dark, or maybe something older than us got too close and took something it wanted. Either way, I keep the urn clean and the blinds half open so the morning light can reach it. And sometimes when the house is still, I swear I hear a soft purring sound, like a reminder that love, even for a pet, can stand guard between us and whatever waits on the other side of the glass. I keep telling myself nothing good happens on I-40 after midnight, yet I was still driving that Friday in late April. A storm had passed over Flagstaff hours earlier, turning the highway slick and black. I had fallen behind schedule for my 6:05 a.m. flight, American 2052, from Phoenix to Dallas, then on to Raleigh for a client meeting. My plan was simple: get gas near Winslow, finish the 2-hour drive to Sky Harbor, park in Long-Term, and make it on the plane with a breakfast sandwich in hand. At 12:47 a.m., I saw the soft blue glow of the Lone Cactus Travel Plaza light up the desert. It was the only gas station open for 30 miles, a small one-story building with 4 pumps and an empty diner attached. Inside, one young employee leaned on the counter, wearing a company windbreaker, half watching a tiny TV bolted to the wall. I pulled into the far island, stepped out into the cool air, and started filling my tank. Across from me, a silver Toyota Camry idled at pump 3. Its paint was faded, and its Arizona license plate was nearly hidden under dust. What caught my eye was the driver. He was already out of the car, holding the nozzle, though his tank door was still shut. He faced me directly. No movement, no hello, just stillness. It felt off. I looked away, focusing on the pump display. Tonuto 1 cent, then $2. The desert was quiet, with just the wind pushing sand across the ground. Then I heard it, a soft thump. Not metal dropping or a car door closing. It was steady, like someone knocking from inside a closet. I glanced at the Camry. The man, tall, maybe in his 40s, with ash-gray hair, put the pump back, even though he'd never opened the tank. He turned his head toward me with one slow, stiff movement. The gas station lights caught his eyes. They looked pale, almost blank. Another knock, louder this time, came from the trunk. That's when I felt something heavy in my gut. I didn't want to get involved, but pretending I hadn't heard it suddenly felt wrong. I asked, "You okay over there, sir?" He didn't react at first. Then calmly, he stepped toward the back of his car, rested his hand on the trunk like trying to calm something scared, and spoke. "Long drive," and he said, "Noisy cargo." His tone was light but thin, too thin. He didn't smile. He opened the trunk just a crack. Inside was only dark and stillness. Then he shut it fast and locked it with a loud click. Another knock, this time desperate, thumped from inside the trunk. The man got in, started the Camry, and rolled away. As he passed, he looked at me one last time. His expression never changed. Then he disappeared into the night. My pump clicked off. I stood there, hands shaking on the handle. The smell of diesel mixed with the damp desert wind. One part of my brain told me to get back on the road. The other part told me to report it. Inside, the clerk, his name tag said Evan, looked up from the TV. "Everything good?" he asked. "There was knocking," I said. My voice came out weak. "From a trunk, that Camry that just left. Silver. Arizona plates. 4-door. Evan blinked. Behind him, an infomercial played. Thunder rolled in the distance over the petrified forest. "Did you get the plate?" he asked. "Number 2 dirty, but it started with CY7, I think." Evan looked uneasy but picked up the phone and called 911. He gave a clear report, glancing at me now and then to confirm the details. The dispatcher told us to wait. A sheriff's deputy was nearby. 15 minutes later, a cruiser pulled in. Deputy Martin took my statement while Evan printed a security still from the camera. The angle didn't catch the plate, but it showed the man looking straight at me. His face lit up, his stance calm, too calm. Martin nodded slowly. "We'll put out a BOLO, he said. "He might take a forest road. People dump cars out there sometimes." I signed the report, swapped cards with Martin, and got back on the road to Phoenix. The rest of the night felt unreal. I parked, boarded my flight, and stared out the window as the desert turned pink in the morning sun. 2 nights later, I was home, suitcase still half unpacked, when Deputy Martin called. "We found the vehicle," he said, "abandoned off Forest Road 142, about 15 miles from where you saw it." "Was anyone?" I asked. He hesitated. No one inside." Then he added, "But the trunk, we found scratch marks, deep ones, and some broken fingernails in the lining." He paused. "We're treating it as a kidnapping. No ID, no prints. He wiped it all." I pictured fingers clawing at the inside of a trunk, bleeding, trying to escape. "Do you have any leads?" I asked. "One. The boot prints outside the car match the man from the gas station camera. They go about 10 yards into the trees, then stop, like he met another car." Martin lowered his voice. "Here's what bothers me. The trunk was locked from the outside, but inside the latch had been tripped, as if someone got it halfway open but lost strength. I imagined a hand, reaching, shaking, just a moment too late. The next day, the news reported an abandoned vehicle tied to a possible missing person case. No name, no driver, no victim. I went back to work, bought groceries, answered emails, but everything felt thin. At night, I started checking news sites, hoping for a face or a name. Nothing came. 3 weeks later, almost midnight again, my phone rang. It was Deputy Martin. "We got DNA from the fingernails," he said. "Female, mid-20s, no match in the system." He paused. "But there's more. The same boot prints were found last night near Happy Jack, off Route 87. Another abandoned car. Different model, but same trunk damage." "What about the driver?" I asked. "Gone," Martin replied. "It's like he vanishes between stops, and we don't know how many more there'll be." I looked at the clock, 12:46 a.m., almost the exact time I saw the Camry. Outside, the streets of Tempe were empty. "We'll send out composite sketches soon," Martin said. "Stay alert. Call us if you see anything." We hung up. I set my phone on the counter and noticed I was squeezing it so hard the case creaked. I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table going over every second of that night. The way he stared, the faint knocking, how he stroked the trunk like it was alive. Then a thought hit me, a terrible thought. Why fake getting gas at all? The Camry's fuel needle showed full. He didn't need gas. He needed me, a witness, someone to hear the knocking and choose to walk away. I was part of his routine. At 3 a.m., I finally lay down. The TV flickered in the background. A weather segment mentioned storms. Just before sleep took me, one memory flashed bright. The letters CY7 on that plate burned into my mind like a scar. This morning, as I write this, there's still no name for the woman, no face for the man, no reason why. Every news story ends with the same line. If you have information, call the tip line. I keep the deputy's card taped beside my monitor. But every time I think of calling again, something holds me back.